All right, welcome to Concept Design Club at VCU. We have a special guest today, John Mahoney. Thank you for joining us, John.
Sure, no problem.
John's worked extensively in the industry, including Disney. He's a concept designer.
Atlantis, and he was a professor at CalArts, and Regan Lodge helped connect us, who was a student at CSSSA, and you're his professor.
Yes, very good. Yeah, I teach at CalArts right now. I also teach at USC and Noman, so still keeping pretty busy.
Nice. So if you'd like to just kind of give us your art background, how you were first introduced to it, and your art education background.
Yeah, I originally went to school for illustration in Brooklyn, New York at Pratt Institute. And then around my senior year, I decided to switch gears, and instead of going into illustration, to try to get to filmmaking. And I thought Disney would be like halfway between filmmaking and, an illustration. So I really wanted to go to USC for film school, and I heard Disney pays for film school, so that was the only reason why I got involved with Disney. And I ended up getting involved with Disney, and the problem was you work so much that you don't really have time to take classes, so kind of a catch-22. But I started, went to the Disney internship in Florida, back when they had an internship, back when they had Florida. I did that for a while. Then I ended up going to California and working doing visual development for Disney. And I did viz dev in about 9 or 10 films for them, which was a lot of fun. You know, definitely a lot of fun. So
cool.
So yeah.
Did you have a design portfolio when you applied for the Disney internship?
Design portfolio?
Like concept design portfolio.
Well, for the internship, it was a very generic internship. I just wanted you to draw humans and animals with no style whatsoever. So it took me like 7 portfolios to wear away all sense of style. So there was nothing left. So it was the most boring thing you could ever do. And then Disney opened up their wonderful arms and took me in. And then the minute I got in there, I started doing all my wild, crazy stuff and stepped on a lot of toes. And I ended up getting blacklisted from Disney, actually. So for many years after that, they showed artists what not to do with my portfolio. So I was an example of what not to do at Disney for many years. It was pretty cool. And then later on, when I got hired to do concept design in California, the people got in trouble in Florida for bashing me all those years. But I did put together a concept design portfolio. Basically, when I was working at Disney California, I started off in the special effects department. So during that time, I worked on my visual development portfolio and kind of moved my way up within the company.
Very cool. So after you moved out to California, and it seems that your work was started to become a little more sculptural, and you started to go into 3D space. Could you just kind of go into like the development of that and exploring new material?
Yeah, I did a little bit of sculpture when I was in college, and both my teachers and friends said, "Don't sculpt. Your sculpture is so bad. Just stick with drawing." Which I did for a while, but I still liked sculpture. No matter how bad it was, I still liked it. So I started sculpting every day during my lunch breaks at Disney. I would take wire and clay and go to figure drawing class and just sculpt. And then my friends would really come up to me and say, "John, yeah, you should stop sculpting. It's really bad." But I kept doing it anyway. So I did it for a couple of years, just during my lunch breaks. And we were working on Treasure Planet, and they wanted us to come up with a character design. So over the weekend, instead of drawing it, I sculpted it. And they really liked it. but finally, after all these years, finally someone liked my sculpture. So then I ended up sculpting all the main characters for Treasure Planet for concept design. And then after I left Disney, I decided not to go into special effects because of the chemicals. There's a lot of bad stuff that you can breathe when you're dealing with resins and all that kind of stuff. It kind of scared the crap out of me. So I decided to just sculpt on my own, and I've been doing it as a kind of like a hobby. And I decided I'm not going to ever do any professional sculpture. So I want to keep something for myself. I don't want to. I've done everything else for the man, so to speak, and I want to keep something for myself. And then I thought to myself, well, maybe I can make a living doing 3D sculpting. So that's when I started learning ZBrush. And a lot of my students at Noman really pushing ZBrush on me. Like, oh, Mahoney, you love ZBrush. No, I don't think so. Then after playing around with it, I was like, yeah, I really hate it. But then a year later, I picked it up again, and I really started to think that this could be really good. And I ended up taking a bunch of classes to learn ZBrush. And then I started falling in love with it. And now I've been teaching ZBrush for about 4 years already now. So I really like it a lot.
And that's 4 years at CalArts?
Yeah, I guess so. Like 4 years at CalArts, 3 years at USC.
Cool.
As well. And I'm teaching an online program for a school in Korea right now, which I'm just finishing up hopefully this weekend, like a little workshop. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Oh, I did for ZBrush, I worked on Frozen recently, Jurassic World, and Avengers. So I was just doing toy sculpting for them through Hasbro Toys.
Cool.
So that was a lot of fun.
Do you find that your sculptures in ZBrush are different from how you would do them in like real life?
Not really. No. In fact, when I put stuff on Facebook, people can't tell the difference.
Wow.
Oh, what kind of clay you're using? Oh, that's ZBrush.
Yeah.
And what paintbrush did you use in ZBrush? Oh, that's Sculpey. So they can't tell the difference. Once you put it into KeyShot, right. I mean, sometimes you can tell, but a lot of times they're asking really weird questions, like, how did you build that 40-foot monster? Where did you get the warehouse? And I'm like, no, that's ZBrush, So yeah, very similar, for better or worse. My stuff still stays the same no matter what medium I switch to. So
going on like your design process, since it is so similar, how do you approach like your design process when you're thinking 2D and then also 3D? Like, are you thinking in different steps, and like how's the process go?
Yeah, it's very similar, both 2D and 3D. Like, let's say 2D, CG, and sculpture, right? Those three. I pretty much approach them the same way. I'll have a very basic idea. Maybe I'll have like a little stick figure that I'll spend like a second working on, and that's basically it. And then I just jump in and start sculpting or drawing. So there's no sketching. There's no preliminary sketching and drawing. There's no preliminary sketching when I move on to ZBrush. So it's kind of an adventure. I have no idea where the things are going to take me. I used to sketch. Yeah, I used to like maybe do some concept little sketches when I was younger. But I don't do that anymore. I work directly, so there is no sketching, and there's no pipeline either.
Right.
So when people ask me what's my pipeline, I don't really have one. So every time I jump into a sculpture, it's a new process. And I went to school, like I said, at Pratt Institute, which is very different than some place like Art Center, where they have you have step 1, step 2, step 3, right. Where Pratt, you kind of roll around in the mud and an idea pops into your head and you draw it. It's a completely different way of working. But I think what's good about that is I'm able to sometimes do characters that maybe people haven't seen before, a little bit different maybe. I don't know. So once I start with a sculpture, usually something strikes my attention, like, oh, I kind of like where that's going. But sometimes I'll bring in research, like artists that I admire, to kind of take the sculpture further. And then when I'm done with that, I might take in another sculptor or artist that I like looking at for the painting side. Then I might look at photography as a way to display the sculpture. So I have like these little angels that take me on my journey to the finished piece.
Very cool. That's definitely different than what we've heard for most concept artists.
There you go.
Which is a beautiful thing.
Don't listen to those concept artists. Don't listen. You know what the problem with them is? They all look the same. I'm sick of those same old movies, right? H.R. Giger, who designed the Alien, was this weird Swiss guy. You know, this weird guy that did gallery work, and he created the Alien. So I really encourage you guys to look at fine art, you know, go to museums, look at stuff outside of the concept design world. And then when you do your concepts, it'll be different. Because if you're doing concepts like them, you're going to have to compete with them, and they're not going to want to give up their job, right? So coming up with something different is great. I was talking to my class yesterday about The Empire Strikes Back and how the snow walkers were based on Salvador Dali's Walking Elephants. Mm-hmm. You know, I wished for the new Star Wars films, they would look at something like Salvador Dali or something like that, and we'd have something completely different. But instead, they're looking at Star Wars. We're going to do new Star Wars looking at Star Wars. It's like it's a very incestuous type of a thing. So, anyway. Anyway. But yeah, I'm really passionate about artists doing different things, and especially young people coming in and changing the business. I find that to be really exciting. So.
Very cool. Going a little bit back in time, more towards your Disney days, I guess just like your pipeline seems to be a little unorthodox, especially if you're to work in a studio. Like, could you talk about your experience working at Disney, and just like the process of getting in there and stuff like that?
Getting in there. I mean, basically what I was doing is I did the internship, got blacklisted from that, went to California to try to work for Lucasfilm. That was banging on Lucasfilm's door. But they wouldn't answer the door at that time. So on my way home, I stopped at Disney to visit a friend of mine. So I was in his cubicle just hanging out. We're talking about the movie Alien. He was doing special effects in betweening on Hunchback of Notre Dame back then. Now he did all the concept work for Avatar. But back then he was just a regular guy. We went to school together. So I was just there, and the supervisor came over to me and asked me, "Who are you and why are you here?" So just being in the right place at the right time, or the wrong place at the wrong time, depending on how you see it, right. That got me in the door, I guess. And I said yes. So that got me into special effects. But every day, every waking moment, I was spending doing visual development, design, color, characters, costume designs. And every time people go into my cubicle, they're like, "Well, you should be in concept design." I was like, "Yes, I know. Get me out of effects." And then at a certain time, I just said, I can't do special effects anymore, so I quit. So I just said, I'm going to break the contract. I'm quitting Disney. I'm leaving. And on my way out the door, I got a phone call. "Hey, do you want to try visual development?" So I didn't even leave the door, right? So they kind of pulled me back in, and that's what got me into. But I was already showing my work in the visual development department. And this is very important. What I do is I went to the third floor, and I looked at all the artwork that was being done, right? Amazing work. And I said, "Well, what can I do differently? I can't compete with these people. They're twice my age. They draw better than I do. What can I do differently?" So I looked at it and said, I wish there was more culture in the Disney style, in the Disney films, more cultural influence. So I put together a whole portfolio based on culture as a puzzle piece that I felt was missing. And they agreed and hired me. And that's how, but every time you go on to another film, you're still kind of fighting to save your job. But because I was playing around with so many different styles, it was very easy to jump from Treasure Planet to Atlantis to whatever, Emperor's New Groove or whatever. In fact, it was fun, but you had a risk of losing your job every time you switched to the next film. But because I had so much of a art background from going to school in New York City and going to the museums and stuff, it was relatively easy. And then at a certain point, I realized, well, I can please all these directors and art directors. Do I want to do that for the rest of my life? You know, I want to please myself now. I proved that I can please them. Now let me start writing and directing my own films and see if I can, you know, please myself. So that's what I've been doing ever since.
Very cool.
So
I guess what would you say is like the right steps to take if you're a student that's interested in producing and directing versus someone that's just going to be working for someone else? Like, what kind of tips would you have for someone that's trying to go on that like type of
yeah, I would say basically what you before. Just do it. You know, make your own films. Even if it's a short, if you want to do, let's say you want to do the next Avatar, right? Do a short film. Do like a 1 minute film where you can do all the CG and all the special effects that you want, but make it 1 minute. If it's a live action film, then you can make it longer. You know, hire the actors. You can get people to work for free. Borrow the cameras from your school. Make the film, edit it, add music, sound effects, and then show it. And then have people tear you apart, which they will. And then, you know, brush yourself off, sew your wounds back up, cry a little bit, and go out and do it again. But I guarantee the next one is going to be twice as good as the first one. And you basically, at that point, you are a filmmaker. You literally are a filmmaker. You don't have to be a good filmmaker to be a filmmaker. You just have to make films. But the chances are, if you're really passionate about films and you study the masters, you know, look at, you know, all the great masters of film, you know, you really study them, you will get better. It's just inevitable. And at a certain time, people will notice that and they'll hire you, and then you can work to make a living being a filmmaker, basically. It sounds easier than it is, but it's not. It's just breaking off enough time in your week to keep making films. You know, I've made like 20 short films, but I wish I made 50. You know, but I have other interests too. I have like sculpture and all this other stuff. But you know, whenever I'm shooting and editing, I'm the most happy. You know, I would drop all the art in a heartbeat if I could just shoot and edit every day, and that would be my life. You know, so.
Very cool.
So since we're all from the East Coast here, do you ever feel like you benefited from going to a school on the East Coast rather than the West Coast?
Oh, definitely. I'm not a lover of New York City at all. I grew up in upstate New York, and when I went to New York City, I was just like, man, it was like an alien planet to me. I never got used to it. But I love the museums. I love the city. The people. There was so many interesting characters that I learned from. I liked going to school at Pratt a lot. I think when you look at my artwork, you can still see the New York City influence. It's very dark and cold and, you know, industrial, and it's not bright and sunny. You're never going to see sun in my artwork. You're never going to see trees. And there's trees in New York, but
not many.
But here it's sunny every day. And I grew up in upstate New York in the woods and the trees and mowing the lawn. I don't like mowing the lawn. I don't like trees. I don't like mountains. I don't like nature. I like garbage and junk and, you know, ugly things. So that's what I found a lot in New York City, and I could take that with me. Hey, I wouldn't give it up at all. In fact, I'm going to New York in 2 weeks. There's some big portfolio review in Manhattan. I don't know if any of you guys are involved in that, but I haven't been to Manhattan in like 15 years. It's pretty crazy.
Sweet.
So all my friends stayed. You know, I left to California, like, no, we love New York, we're staying. I'm like, okay, see you later. So anyway. And where are you guys located?
In Richmond, Virginia.
Richmond, Virginia. Yeah. How far away is that from New York?
7 hours. I'm actually heading there. I'm heading there this weekend.
Oh, okay, great.
So yeah. But
so what is your major? Are you majoring in concept design or no?
we're called the Communication Arts program. So
Okay.
it's more or less anything that has a narrative, but we have a pretty wide array from concept design to storyboarding, graphic design elements, advertising, typography, more or less anything that has a narrative or trying to communicate something.
Yeah.
Okay.
But our department chair for next year will be a concept designer, and his name is Tyree Van Ellingson.
He worked on Avatar as well.
Nice. So I can't bash Avatar too much.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to school for, again, it was communication design as well. So I did illustration, graphic design, typography, art direction.
Right.
Back then we didn't have animation, but I think they have it now. But that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very good.
Were you ever like part of the portfolio review process at Disney or at any of the studios that you worked at?
Well, I would say Cal Arts, I'm on the portfolio review board, and I've been on there for 12 years.
Okay.
As for Disney, I wasn't on the review, but I went through the portfolios. And basically what they would do is they would read out the portfolios before I even got to the review room, whatever. So let's say people submitted like 50 portfolios or 100 portfolios. We would only see like maybe 12. So they were already weeded out beforehand. A friend of mine, Dan Hansen, who worked at Disney for like 20 years, he was my roommate when I was at Cal Arts. He was the head of the department. He was on a lot of those reviews. And what he always said was, if you don't know what you want, then they don't know how to hire you. So you definitely want to be very specific when you're showing your stuff to a big studio. Like only apply to one department, layout, or storyboard, or character design, or animation, or rigging. Don't apply to 5. Even though you might know all those things, only show one thing to them, to the big studios. Do all those things, but only show one.
Right.
The best advice I can give is always check and see what the next films they're working on 2 or 3 years down the line. If they're doing, I don't know, I can't think of dancing trees. Do a whole portfolio of dancing trees. Whatever, and you can read about it. You can totally read about it in the papers and see what was going on. So when I was applying to do visual development, I knew they were working on Kingdom of the Sun, which turned into Emperor's New Groove. So I made sure to have South American artwork in my portfolio. I think that was the thing that kind of tipped the scale.
Yeah, talking about culture before. Just like having a culture kind of portfolio.
So it sounds like your portfolio changes a lot, like maybe from film to film, or like do you adjust it for each new film that you're applying to?
Trying to remember. I haven't shown my portfolio in like 15 years. Yes. Well, basically, you're not going to change the entire portfolio, but have like 5 or 6 pages specifically towards that. And that's how you can build a portfolio. Every time you go to a new studio and you do those 5 or 6 pages, you're building your portfolio as you go. It's like a free inspiration,
right,
basically. So. But now it's kind of just word of mouth. I think people know my work enough, so I haven't really had to show my portfolio in a long time. It's kind of weird. But I keep pounding Facebook, and I just keep getting calls to do work. It doesn't have to be Facebook, but any online, any place where you just keep people know where to find your work. It's, let's say 500 people see your work, and one of them is going to be like, hey, can you do this? And then if you like it, and they like you, then you're doing another freelance job.
So do you have any like daily art practices or kind of just things to keep you fresh in terms of technique and stuff like that? Or is it...
Yeah, I do, actually. That's a great question. I have reference binders. Or I'm building reference binders. So I call it my inspiration binder, where I take stuff from online and I print them out and I put them in plastic sleeves, and I have a binder of stuff that I'm inspired by. Now I have like 80 binders. I've got quite a few binders. But anyway, you start with one, right? And then you keep piling that. So during the day, I'll be organizing my little pages and half an hour later, I'm so inspired, I just jump onto the computer and start doing things. So I'm constantly looking for stuff, but a lot of times people now they know what type of style I like, so they're constantly sending me stuff. So I get like 20 or 30 messages a day saying, John, check this out. And usually I'm like, oh my God, that's awesome. So I'm constantly, but the thing is, the biggest thing I want to advise you guys, I know every one of you has a giant hard drive full of images that you admire, right? I know you do. I know you do. You all do, right? Print them out. Don't just leave it in a hard drive. You're not going to learn from that. I know it's expensive to print them out, but let's say you print out 3 or 4 or 5 images a week. And if you have it, then you can lay them out on a table and you can analyze them and say, let me mix, I don't know, James Jean with, Aubrey Beardsley or something like that. And you start mixing these things together and you start coming up with your own kind of soup. And I force my students to do that. I know they're kind of like, oh, a binder, but that costs $10. And I'm spending all my money on tuition. I can't afford a binder. And I'm like, you're spending all this money on tuition. You can skip a lunch and buy a binder. Because what you learn from that, all you need is one freelance job. I was telling my students, my first year at Disney, paid for all of my art education and all of the art supplies I ever bought my entire life, was paid for 1 year at Disney. But all of that came from all the reference material that I was hoarding, So I truly recommend that, to really become ravenous about not only doing that, another thing is even more important than that, is to take the artwork and copy it. Like you take a drawing that let's say you take Claire Wendling, right? Claire Wendling, you know her, she's incredible, right? Mm-hmm. Draw her drawings. Even if you throw the drawings away, just as practice, and you internalize what she does. Or mix Claire Wendling with somebody else, and you internalize that. And then after a while, you won't need to look at her anymore. It becomes part of you. So in my illustration classes, I'll bring in different artists, and I'll say, okay, we're going to draw the figure model today, but we're going to draw it like Chris Sanders or whatever. We're going to do a Chris Sanders day, right? And we're all going to draw like Chris Sanders. And then the next day, we're going to mix Chris Sanders with H.R. Giger. I don't know. We do all these weird things. And I wish I had done that more when I was younger. I spent a lot of time spinning my wheels. When I was in New York, my teachers would say, draw until your eyeballs fall out. Just keep drawing. It's like, yeah, but drawing smart is different than just drawing, right? When you're specifically saying, I want to learn something from this particular artist, and you start art directing yourself. It's very, very specific. And when you do that, you have a less of a chance of people pulling you off of your journey. They say, oh, well, you should do this because that's what we're hiring now in the studios, or you should do that. And you start losing yourself. But if you say, no, I really like this artist. I love this artist. I'm going to become this artist for a week. And then I'm going to go on to the next artist and the next artist. The next thing you know, people start to look at your work as being unique. There's this. Have you guys heard of Ashley Wood? The artist Ashley Wood. I'll send you some links. He's pretty incredible, but he started off just copying all these different artists, and now he has a specific style. He does all these series of books and toys, and he's like he's like a superstar. But it was based on copying all these other artists. He was put down for that. But then later on, when it all came together, now they think he's a genius. They forget about the years he spent copying Kent Williams and all that type of stuff.
Right. I guess, what's your personal experience and the general atmosphere at CalArts, and what do you think students get the most out of from there?
Okay, well, I would say the thing is, CalArts is very much like the East Coast. It's very much like the school I went to in New York. It has a very it's how to boil it down to a simple sentence, but I think that it's based on individual creativity and individual trajectory That's why so many directors come from Cal Arts, because all of the classes animation department, and every student is required to make a film a year, your own film. So you have to write it, storyboard it, animate it, color it. It's a nightmare, but you have to do it, and you have to take all your classes as well. So so that's great. And also, when I walk to class, I have to walk past the dancers, the fine art that's on the walls, the performance art. So it's this incredibly inspiring. I've been there 12 years, and I'm still inspired every day. And I didn't really know what Cal Arts was about until a couple of years ago when I went on a tour because my daughter was interested in going to Cal. Actually, I dragged her to Cal Arts, but anyway, another story. But anyway, we were doing a tour of Cal Arts, and I didn't realize that the music department teaches the same way. They teach people to be their own music creators. The same with the dance, same with theater. And she was able to direct her own theater play her first year. You know, so they put you in the director's chair right away. So when I first started teaching there, I was surprised how inspired I was leaving. Where when you work at like a studio, you're giving a lot. So you're kind of like your battery is being drained, so to speak. It's inspiring in some ways, but draining. Where teaching, on the other hand, I got so jazzed I couldn't wait to go home and do my own artwork. So yeah, flash 12 years later, I've been able to create a lot of work. So yeah, I'll work every spare moment of the day. Even during class, I'll be working on my own stuff. Usually, this happened to me for a while. I was so inspired that I couldn't sleep. And I didn't sleep for like 10 years, which is not good. It's not healthy, by the way. I would go to bed at midnight and wake up at 3 a.m. every day for like 10 years, and it's really bad on your body. But anyway, I got a lot of artwork done. So I would do 4 hours of work before I even drove to Cal Arts every day. And people were asking me questions at 4 in the morning on Facebook. Hey, what should I put in my portfolio? And I'd go, and I'd be typing it out. Because I'm awake anyway. I'd be lonely. I'd be glad to have someone to talk to. But so now what I try to do is I try to watch like really boring TV shows and try to get some sleep and just do something boring every day. So now I'm about 5 hours of sleep a night, which is much better than 3. But yeah, I find Cal Arts to be incredibly inspirational. It's a small school, you know, and I also teach at Cal Arts, or I also teach at USC, which is this giant palace. You know, it's like paved in gold. I work in the George Lucas building, which is right next door to the Spielberg building, which is attached to the Zemeckis building. You know, and then we teach at Cal Arts, it's incredibly creative, but it's our little home, you know. So I like jumping back and forth from the two different schools, actually.
That's fun. In terms of just inspiration when you're younger and inspiration now, I know you're saying that just being around other students is inspiring, but what other artists would you look at for reference? I know you mentioned, I think it's Evan Wood.
Ashley Wood. Yeah, I actually wrote down some artists because that was the only thing I wrote down from the questions. There's Simon Lee, and you can look them up later. Simon Lee, his website is called Spider Zero, and he's supernatural. I took several of his classes. An incredible sculptor. I mean, scary good. There's James Jean. Hopefully you guys know James Jean. Okay, checking. You guys should know James Jean. Kim Jung-gi. Right, you know him? Incredible. You guys should know he's probably going to go down in the history books as one of the greatest draftsmen who ever lived, literally. And I got a chance to meet him several times in person. I'm like, it's like hanging out with God. Hey God, how you doing, man? I'm doing all right. And then there's Ashley Wood, Kent Williams, who went to school in New York. He was a year before me. He actually invented the graphic novel. He was a fine art major at Pratt, but he decided to do fine art paintings as a comic book. So he did the very first graphic novel. Then there's the older artists like Egon Schiele, Klimt, Picasso, Michelangelo, Hans Belmer, which you may not have heard of. He's a surrealist, very strange. And then there's the filmmakers: David Lynch, David Cronenberg, Martin Scorsese, Spielberg, Robert Rodriguez. Not that he does the greatest films all the time, but as a filmmaker, he's incredibly inspirational. He does everything himself: edits, writes, directs, does his own special effects. He's one of my heroes as well. Supposedly, he bought the rights to the Heavy Metal movie, which is an animated film they made back in the day. And my goal is to do a section for Heavy Metal. So I'm working on an animated film right now, and I have about 7 or 8 animators working on it. And when it's done, I'm going to show it to Robert Rodriguez and see if we can do a section. Because in Heavy Metal, they have each studio would do like maybe a 7-minute segment, and you piece it together, and it's based on the Heavy Metal magazine. Which I'm not sure how good the film was, but they did a great job with the Animatrix. Have you ever seen the Animatrix? No? Oh, God. Okay. Turn the video off. Go home and rent Animatrix. Animatrix. It's incredible. All done by different animators. Kind of like an anime flavor, but based on the Matrix mythology. One of the best animated films I've ever seen. I love it. So check it out.
Definitely. Do you think that there's a resurgence in 2D animation, or are you seeing more 3D animation working?
I don't know about it too. If there hasn't been a resurgence, I haven't heard about it. It's pretty much dead.
Yeah.
But stop motion's coming back with Ox Trolls and all the stuff they're doing with Leica Studios. They're doing more stop motion TV commercials. So that's awesome. At Cal Arts, 90% of the students still do 2D. They're going to hang on to the bitter end. A lot of them go into TV animation, like they took over Cartoon Network. A lot of them still get hired at studios and things like that. So when I graduated school, there was no 2D going on. There was the movie Secret of Nim, if you remember, that was made. And it was so good, I remember thinking, this movie is so good, it didn't make a penny at the box office. And I was like, I'm not even going to try to get into animation. But now, being a little bit older, I realized that you can do whatever you want. You don't have to wait for 2D animation to come back. You can do it yourself and bring it back yourself. Right. It's up to you guys. If you want 2D animation, animate it. Do a little short and get some recognition on the internet or whatever. Raise some money maybe on Kickstarter. Make it a little bit longer. Raise some more money. It's just doing it yourself if you're really passionate about it. I would say, though, if you're going to do it, please do it differently. Don't just do Robin Hood again. It's like, please, God. There's no reason to bring back old Disney. It's so tired. Let's do something fresh and new and different with 2D animation. That's when people are going to go back and embrace it. We can't just rehash. Same with 3D. The 3D stuff is running out of steam too. Probably another 5 years. Like, all right. Right now, all the studios look alike. And people say, "Oh, did you see that Disney film?" It's like, no, that was Blue Sky. Oh, I thought that was Pixar. It's like, well, I don't know, because they're all at this really high quality. They all look great. So it's hard to differentiate. So then you go back to the artist and you say, well, how can we really push the style to really make it look different? Like Box Trolls, I think, was very different visually. So that's a long answer to a short question.
Right, and there's also the combination of 2D and 3D that seems to be coming in. I know the short, what was it,
Paperman?
Paperman, yeah. That was a new innovative approach to it, which was pretty cool.
Absolutely, I love it.
Yeah. I think we're going to open up for a Q&A, if that's cool with you.
Okay. And before you do that, is this a student-run group that you guys have put together yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're talking to president and vice president
right
now.
Nice. Yeah. And how long have you guys been together? How long has this been going on?
A month and a half, actually.
Oh, brand new. Okay.
Yeah.
Like 6 years.
Yeah, no, it's
started.
pretty new.
No.
So we really appreciate that you
Yeah.
giving us your time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And how many people do you have so far in your group?
Well, in the group, I think it's 120.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
VCU is a pretty big school, so even though the concept or the communication arts program isn't huge, there's still a lot of people that are interested.
Okay.
We've
Good
got
for you. That's great.
We've even
Very
got
good.
some advertising majors, like who are in a grad program who want to come to our club, and it's like very cross-disciplinary across the school, so pretty cool.
That's great. Yeah. Absolutely. Very good. Cool.
So does anyone have any questions?
Hi.
All right. Hello.
I just have a question. I was looking at your work before. I noticed you're teaching like classes for inspiration, and I love your work. And like one of the things that I was staring at is like you have such a distinct way of kind of transforming something to like almost something that exists into something that almost doesn't exist, but still seeing like the connection between where you started pulling things away to make it your own. And one thing that I was wondering is like, you know, like being obviously like a talented artist like yourself, thinking about how do you like get into that mode where you start to almost like think out the box to the point where you're thinking to a whole different universe. You're almost as if you're like giving birth to like a whole new art style that in, you know, being a student, it's like obviously we strive to be different. We strive to be like something new, as you were saying, but like what were your steps to get there? Because, you know, being like right now I'm a 20-year-old junior. Is like at what stage in your life did you start to really get that, you know, boom, I'm being like blessed with this new idea where I'm starting to create new things that weren't seen in the past?
Okay, that's a great question. There's two questions I would say. One is how to get into the zone, and the other is where did these creative things come from? Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'll answer the idea of where it's evolved from, because I didn't know where this came from actually. And what I had done, just for the fun of it, is on Facebook I put together photos of my artwork from when I was like 5 years old, all the way up until I was maybe 30 or 35. And I looked at it, and it was a very slow transition. But I would say that it was an accumulation of more and more artists that I liked, that I would draw from. So when I was first starting off, I only looked at Marvel comics when I was probably 15. And my work just looked like a very awful, pitiful version of Marvel comics. And I would draw my cats once in a while. That was basically it. And then I went to art school, and we had art history. You know, and I'd fall asleep in our history class every day, but once in a while when I was awake, I would see things. And I started, when I was in figure drawing class, my teacher told the whole class, he said, to become a great artist, you need to know art like nobody's business. You need to be a master historian of art. And I was the only person to raise my hand. I said, well, I want to be my own artist. I don't want to look at other artists. I want to be my own artist. He's like jumped down my throat, and he said, what can you do when you don't have the tools to do it? You know? And I didn't quite understand exactly what he was saying, but I followed his advice anyway. And I went to the library, and I got as many books as I could carry. Literally, I was just dragging them to my dorm room, and I didn't even have space to sleep. Like 2 years, I just slept in a little corner of my bed because everything was covered with books, and the floor was covered with books. And I was very confused at that time. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was becoming acquainted with the art. I think if I could go back in time, I would say, no, to sit down and draw from it so you're not. But anyway, so that was an accumulation. So what you're seeing now of my work is an accumulation of all of those things, you know, up until now. And I'm still taking new stuff in. But the other question you have, which is really great, is how do you go into that dream state and create? And this is something I tell my students every day is don't think about art and don't think about drawing, especially while you're drawing. Because what happens is you become really self-conscious. And I always say drawing is one step above knitting. You know, our brains are very fertile, and drawing only requires a very little bit to get things going. If you're thinking about it, you're forcing your line, and you're forcing your art, and it looks forced. I'm trying to become a concept artist, right? Instead of just listening to music, or I listen to books on tape, or I try to think of something else besides art, and it becomes very therapeutic. And then you go into this dream state, and then you wake up an hour later, and oh, there's a sculpture in front of me. It happens every day. You know, same with drawing. I swear, I have complete amnesia about all the drawings I've done in the last 10 years. I don't remember doing them. I just look at the work and, oh, that's kind of cool. Who did that? You know. But yeah, so I try to do that. And when I go around the room in my classroom, I know who's thinking about drawing and who's not. You can just see it in their body language. You're like, they're all crunched over and they're measuring and they're trying. And I'm like, what are you thinking about? I already know what they're thinking about, but I said, what are you thinking about? I'm thinking about the gesture. Stop thinking about that. Think about the last movie you saw, and to put your mind into that. Say, how did you feel about that movie? Did you like it? Didn't you like it? And when you get into that zone, your drawing comes out much better. And if you look at these great artists that we admire, these illustrators, and you look at the expression on their face when they're drawing, they're never trying. If you go to Comic-Con or something, they're just hanging out. And you think it's because of talent. It's not talent. It's because they're able to quiet their mind and relax and get their mind off of something. And then you accept your mistakes. You accept the fact that I'm never going to be Kim Jong-gi as long as I live. And I accept that. I'm just Mahoney and I do my thing, you know? So once you accept that, you start working at the highest level, whatever that is. And then you can just kind of zone out. Okay, great question, by the way. Really great question.
That kind of ties into one of Reagan's questions, where he was asking how your work was received by film studios because it's so different. And he was wondering if you ever felt disappointment because the final film was so wildly different from your style and the stuff you drew for them.
That's a great question. That's almost a question you could ask all the concept designers at Disney at that time. The answer is no. I didn't care. They paid us the same amount of money whether they used my work or not. Right. And I used that money to buy really cool art supplies. I did not care. In fact, not only did I not care, but I was working on my own stuff constantly. So when you go into a meeting and you don't care, you're more relaxed, and actually you're a much friendlier, more relaxed person, you know? And I got along with the directors and the producers because I didn't care, but I was very laid back about it. I remember one time we were working on a film and they couldn't figure out, they had a certain problem in the movie that they couldn't figure out and they were all stressing about it. And I said, dude, it's just a cartoon. And they all laughed. They all went out to lunch. And it's like, they like that type of attitude because it is just a cartoon, you know? So if I did care, then it would drive me to pieces. I would be like, oh my God, they didn't use my drawing, you know? And it happened with some designers. Some designers, because they put all their heart and soul into somebody else's project. What happens when someone pulls the rug out and they say, oh, we're switching to a different style? You know, so you want to do the very best work you can as a craftsman, but you can't care. How can you care? You know, they switch directors every 3 weeks, you know? You shouldn't care. I mean, you should care, but you shouldn't care. So I put my care and my heart and soul into my personal work. And then when I left Disney, there was no slowing down. It wasn't like, oh, now I got to get going. The wheels were already like rolling. Yeah. So, but at the same time, yeah, you don't want to keep working on films where your stuff isn't being shown. So that's why I left to do my own movies. You know, now I didn't leave on an angry note. I left like, wow, I learned so much. I contributed to the archives, which will someday uncover maybe. But no, I just want to do my own thing. It's like, okay, you have movie credits, right? I've had so many friends. Oh, there's mine. Like 400 names down. Oh, there's me. My credit is on the top. John Mahoney, not the second, top. That even if I do a $2, I'd rather do a $2 movie and have my name on the top than a $20 million movie and have my name on the bottom. So there you go. Dun, 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 dun. You get the idea.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of directors that I admire that have that same attitude. Martin Scorsese would never be a storyboard artist. You know what I mean? He'll make his own movies. He will scrape together, he will mortgage his own house to make his movies, right? So I look towards them as, and you can, it doesn't matter if you want to be a storyboard artist, you want to be a concept artist, you want to work in those other areas, that's fine. It's that you need to choose and then go for your choice. That's all. They're all good, as long as what makes you happy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you have one more question. The second one.
Yeah. Reagan was talking about an exercise you took them through where they paused scenes from the movie Gladiator, and he said it really helped him. And if there were any other exercises that you could share related to drawing or scripting or design.
Yeah. Well, I come up with different projects every day. Like, for instance, the one we did at USC a couple of days ago, we were drawing again from a movie, drawing from the movie Moulin Rouge. But instead of doing story panels, we did a long panoramic. So every frame would be connected to the next frame. It'd be this long, we just kept drawing for like 2 hours. So everyone created their own panoramic. And then at a certain point, I switched movies. Then we were drawing from Akira Kurosawa's Ran, which is an ancient war movie. So you segue between Moulin Rouge to this war movie. But when you see the drawings, it looks like one really weird movie. You can do that. Let's say you can take your favorite 3 movies and blend them together into one movie. And what it does is it creates a portrait of you. Because as people, we like different things. I like horror movies someday and a comedy. But when you mix them together, it's almost like a visual script for your future film. That's something I just came up with recently. I'm very proud of that. That was a new assignment. But yeah, maybe I can email you guys a general list of things. That's just one of them. Mixing artists is another one. I kind of mentioned that a little bit. Taking your inspirations and kind of mixing them together. Right. I had a concept design class for doing creatures, and we watched a really scary short film. And I said, I want you guys to draw the characters exactly as you remember them, but with your eyes closed. Right? So they did these crazy drawings, and I said, open your eyes and make it into a creature. And they were different. They were really wild and really cool. So there's ways of, I know it's kind of like a hippie mentality that I have in a way. But then I also took classes at Art Center. I took classes at a bunch of different schools. So part of it is that kind of weird, waking up and drawing your dream. And then the other side is the highly technical side of how do you make it work. And the reason I'm trying to learn those 2 worlds is so that I can do my own stuff, my own films. Right now I'm doing my own comic book, which I'm going to have a Kickstarter. It's going to be launching soon. And I could say I was working on it for 6 months, but I've really been working on it my entire life, trying to do a comic book. And I finally, all the planets finally aligned, and it's going to be done. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Cool. Do you find yourself trying out new mediums pretty frequently, or just new avenues of expressing yourself? Like you're saying, this is your first comic. Do you think you do that pretty often?
Yeah, I don't, because it's like I'm in my own head. I don't really see it that much. But then I hear other people like, oh man, you're doing something different every day. And I'm like, I guess so. And it's not like I'm forcing myself, but there's so many inspirations that if I see something and I'm really inspired by it, I'll try to do it right away before the inspiration leaves. Mm-hmm. And also my classes, I try to teach differently every year. So we'll switch, like in sculpture class, we'll switch different mediums every year. Illustration class will be new assignments. ZBrush was a whole new thing for me. That was very scary. But I'll try different approaches in ZBrush every time. So it's very unpredictable. I have no idea what I'm going to be teaching that day. I usually decide the morning as I'm driving to class, because that way it's fresh. You know, it's like the inspiration is right there. So pretty exciting.
Cool. Does anyone else have any more questions?
I have a question. So you mentioned a value on story, and story, the way you work on it, it seems like it's almost different from the way you would practice art, because it's a little different than, like, well, when you talk about the method of, like, emulating other artists and kind of, like, trying to emphasize, like, it's a little different with story. But it sounds like, is it something that, like, you work on the art and then the story comes, or do you actively work on the narrative part of it? Like, do you study story, basically?
That's a good question. That's a big one. I did study story. I studied Robert McKee for like 5 years or something like that, and all that. And he's great. I love him. I think I hugged him once, but I was, like, I love you. He signed the book, Robert McKee. But I had to let Robert go. And the thing is about that, not that, we had to break up close, and we started going different ways, but I can't do that. And the thing is, for all of us, we have different ways of interpreting the world, So I realized I wrote about 3 or 4 movie scripts and stuff like that. But it depends. Like I relate to David Lynch. I relate to his world, and he's a very stream of consciousness type of person. His films are not big blockbusters; they're very small, and few people. He has a small group of followers. So I think it's up to each individual to decide how you want to tell your stories. In other words, you can take the 3-act structure, you can toss it away. The most important thing is that you write and you create stories. That's more important than if they're good. It's more important that if other people like it. Just the fact, and if you're focused on Robert McKee so much that you're terrified to write because you're not good enough, then that's not right. So I've been trying to do a comic book since I was 10 years old, right? And then finally, I let go of the story. I just said, I can't do this. I can't. I said, let it go. I said, I'm going to do an abstract comic book with no story. I'm just going to let the images happen. And instead of doing 2 pages and then putting it down for a year, 2 pages next year, I did a whole 108-page comic in like 3 weeks. Everything just kind of flowed out of me. And then when I started to add word bubbles, all of a sudden things stopped again. And I realized that for me personally, I don't think that way. And every person, whether you might be passionate about structure or you might be semi-passionate about structure or whatever, you have to embrace that. If you're writing every day and you're cranking things out, great. So you don't have to question it. But if you're slowing down or you're running into the blocks, then you know that there's something in your way, and you have to get it out of the way. You have to get it out of the way. So for me, I create art, and a lot of times people look at the art and like, oh, I see a story in there. I'm like, really? Tell me, because I don't see. Yeah. So it's very much like the films that I'm doing. I will sculpt the characters, I will sculpt the vehicles, I will create the environments. And when that thing is finished, then I'll write the story afterwards. And my goal is to do feature films without any dialogue. Because I love visual. I love those visual moments in films without dialogue. And plus, I'm not good at writing dialogue. I'm not Tarantino. I'm just not. And I love visuals. I love Stanley Kubrick and stuff like that. So I'm going to try to do, maybe, I would love to do a horror film or something like that, or a romance with not a word of dialogue. Even when I watch foreign films, I always turn off the subtitles. I just want to watch and I want to understand the film. I even like not understanding the language because then I can really enjoy the way people talk and the expressions that they have and the visuals. I hate grammar. I hate the whole thing. And what a great way to say, you know, I didn't learn a damn thing in high school. Here's my film, you know. But I did learn a lot in art school, and I love visuals. I love camera moves and stuff like that. That's just me, you know. So your question has been plaguing me for all these years. It stopped me from making a comic book. It stopped me from making a feature because I was so worried about, well, what if the story's not good enough? And then you struggle and struggle, and you make the story really good, then you don't want to make the movie.
Yeah.
Right? Because you work yourself, you know the story so well that it's just too much work to actually now I got to draw all those pictures. Where if I make it up as I go along, then it's like this mystery tour. I have no idea where it's going. Now I'm going to do this book. I'm going to get it published, and I already paid for the book. It's 1,000 books. I may end up with 1,000 books in my house for the rest of my life. Maybe not a single person would buy it. I'm really nervous about that, but it's done. Those books are done, and at least a couple people will buy them. So anyway, but it was a big change. I'll be perfectly honest with you. This is something I want you guys all to hear. It was around December. Life was. I remember sitting in my car thinking, life is good. Life is awesome. You know, I'm working. I'm making a lot of money. I'm teaching. I'm doing all this freelance work. I'm working on Jurassic World. Couldn't be better. I'm like, oh my God, something might be wrong. Right? And then I had a little stomach ache. I was like, maybe I should check on it, right? I went, and the stomach ache got a little worse. I went to the hospital, and I had an X-ray, and they said, you're probably not going to live very much longer. It was really scary. Yeah. They said, now I was like, what should I do? Should I eat better? And they said, you should get your affairs in order because the thing inside me was big enough that it would just wipe me out. So yeah, it was pretty scary. So I was like, you know, getting my bank account, making sure my kids could get my money and everything like that. And then I had an operation, and they actually were able to take this thing out. Thank goodness. It was like a 10% chance of survival. And then when I was in the hospital, it took a while to recover. And I was just sitting there. I couldn't really do it. I couldn't draw anymore or anything because I was just all racked in pain. But I started coming up with this idea for this comic book, and I started thinking, you want to just create art. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. I remember thinking, why am I spending all my life not doing it? And now I can't do it because I'm not going to live another week. What a waste. And I decided at the moment, I'm going to make this comic book for myself. It has nothing to do with making money or anything like that, because who knows how much longer we have. And that's when the artwork really started pouring out of me. I started taking more chances. I started putting a lot more money into my own films. And it's a big question we have to ask ourselves. It's not about being a good artist. It's not. It's about getting it out into the world, you know. And I think they came out fairly well. But that's the story. I'm trying to put together that story to kind of, you know, tell this kind of Kickstarter type of a thing. So yeah, now I have a second chance. I really have a second chance on life. You know, this is my part 2. And the funny thing is, when I was there, when I found out the news, I remember thinking, you tend to reflect on your life at that point. And I remember thinking I didn't have any regrets. And I remember thinking the most important thing that I did in my life was what I'm doing right now, is to pass these ideas, you know, along to young people and stuff like that. The teaching that I've done all those years, it wasn't the artwork, it wasn't the sculptures, it was, because once you teach someone to be inspired, and then they teach their children, you know, and it's this positive. So now that I'm on the other side of the mirror, so to speak, I still plan on continuing to teach and to teach people about these type of things, you know, to just experience life and just do art and enjoy it, and don't worry about it being good or bad. You know, it doesn't, because in the end, it doesn't matter to anybody. It doesn't matter if he did that hand perfectly or not. It's better doing the hand than not doing it at all. You know. So anyway, got a little heavy there. Sorry about that.
All about it here.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I think we had someone over here.
Right after all this new stuff, this is another question. Near the beginning of this talk, you mentioned that you stepped on a lot of toes at Disney and got blacklisted, and I'm kind of just curious about what you did, because if that's okay.
Oh yeah, it wasn't a big deal. Okay, well, a lot of things, I guess. The thing is, in the internship, I did everything I was supposed to do, but also I spent all night doing things I wasn't supposed to do, I guess. Because I was just so excited. I never had my hands on an animation camera before. And at that time, Nightmare Before Christmas came out. And I was so excited, I couldn't just stay home, and I couldn't just do the Mickey in between. So, and in Florida, they sell real animal fur, which is, I never saw real in the art store. So I would buy animal fur, and I would put armature around it, and I was doing these stop-motion creatures. And each person has a mentor at Disney in the internship. So the mentor was like, well, what are you working on? So I brought in this set with this animal fur creatures, and he said, I never want to speak to you again. And that was it. And so I had no mentor. And then during the animations, you know, we had to do the hindered walk where someone is kind of like not walking properly. So I had someone get shot with a machine gun and all their guts fall out and they're dragging it across the thing. And I did something where the old lady crosses the street. It's this storyboard test. And I did one where this old lady gets her dress caught in a manhole in the street. And a bunch of, what do you call them? All these kids, Boy Scouts. The bus drives over her dress and rips her dress off. So you got this naked old lady standing in the street. I thought it was a good idea. But a lot, they had one where Jasmine and Aladdin are fighting in a boxing ring, and Jasmine was 9 months pregnant, and so I was having fun. And what I think what really made them upset was that I was doing visual development. And I was constantly sending it to California. And we had I'm not going to mention the director, but we had a director come to our class, I guess they call it. And they went around the room and they asked, what do you want to do? And so everyone said, I want to be an animator, I want to be a layout artist. And I said, I want to be a director. He's like, how dare you? Do you know how long it takes to be a director? And I was like, sorry, you asked. So I had that attitude that I want to be a director. And when you're an intern in a big studio, it's like, dude, just relax, okay? You're an intern. But I couldn't relax. I was so excited. I was doing full color when I was supposed to do black and white and stuff like that. So I guess they figured, oh, that's a perfect portfolio to show people what not to do. So when I was in California, I met up with a person who became a close friend of mine. He's like, dude, we knew you're famous. We know you. They talk about you all the time. And I was like, really? Yeah, what not to do? And I was, oh. So, you know, my attitude is I'd rather be the worst in the class or the best. I don't want to be in the middle. I don't want to be ignored, you know? So that was my attitude. And I say it to my students every day. I said, always look around the class and see what you can do differently. And yeah, maybe you might step on some toes. Maybe your teacher might not speak to you for a week or whatever. But you stand up for yourself and hopefully people eventually start liking your work. I always say the same thing. When Tim Burton was at Disney working on Black Cauldron, they didn't use a single drawing he did. Nothing. They saw him as this weirdo, right? They finally said, oh, you can do your own movie. So he did the short Vincent, which is an incredible little stop motion short. And then he slowly started doing his small movie, the Frankenweenie and all that. I like that type of person. I want to be like Tim Burton. Even though he was disliked and not disliked, he's misunderstood. Those are my heroes, and I will stand up for even if I get blacklisted. I would say for you guys, if you were going to try that in a studio, those are my heroes, and I will stand up for even if I get blacklisted. I would say for you guys, if you were going to try that in a studio, you can do it in a much nicer way, I guess. Not that I wasn't mean to anyone, but you can meet people more halfway. Like if I went to my supervisor and said, I'm really interested in stop motion. Could you show me some principles of animation that could help me with stop motion? Then they may have communicated with me. But me walking in there with this animal fur creatures, this is like it just freaked people out. So you can kind of meet people halfway. I had one of my students, not going to mention his name, but he did this really disturbing film at CalArts where this old lady puts people into a meat grinder at the end of the film. It's this really disturbing film called Cat Food. Maybe we'll find it online. And I said to him, just do the best job you can with this film, and I helped him with the color and everything. And he's like, well, no studio is going to take me. And I was like, take yourself, man. Greenlight yourself. Just do your own thing, right? He showed it, and all the studios liked it. He ended up getting hired at Pixar as an intern. And I said to him, your work is incredible. Just put your work on the walls in your cubicle so people can see it and just do your work. And don't step on anybody's toes. Be nice to everybody. He was promoted from intern to visual development to director in 1 year.
Wow.
At Pixar. I take an oath to God. I'll give you a hint. If you look at the end credits to Ratatouille, that's all his work. That's all I'm going to say. So the thing is, put yourself out there. And the thing is, when you're really passionate about your work, don't worry about the subject matter. Don't worry about the subject matter because there was someone at Pixar who liked horror. You know what I mean? So there's going to be people out there just like you. So don't worry about changing yourself to make Pixar like you. I never tried to make Disney like me. I was actually trying to make Lucasfilm like me. And Disney just kind of came along, and but people do like passionate art. They like people who like their own art, and if you have that confidence, people will find you. And the good thing is, the right people will find you. I don't think I really belonged at Disney. If I had the internet back then and people saw my work. Maybe if I ended up at Stan Winston's studio, I probably would have belonged more over there. But we didn't have the internet back then. So, and I actually I had a great time at Disney, but I didn't belong there. So get your work out there so that people can find you and like, hey, you belong with us. And yes, I do belong with you. We like the same films. We hang out and talk about the same things. So keep that in mind for sure.
We have time to fit in 2 more questions. How would you compare the industry to how it is now to when you first started working at Disney?
Well, I can talk about Disney. Well, there's a lot of things to talk about. I think that
or maybe not just Disney.
Just in general.
Maybe not just Disney, but just in general, like how the industry.
General?
Yeah.
Well, now I think the biggest thing is artists need to be more versatile. If you're a graphic designer, you need to animate. If you do a concept design, you need to know 3D. You need to know ZBrush. Because things are so much faster now. And to be able to crank out work faster, and a lot of times they're going to ask you, well, can you also animate that? So if you're a storyboard artist, you need to also make things move around a little bit more. So I think the artist needs to be more versatile than they needed to be 20 years ago. I think it makes it more fun too. The labor is going overseas, right? So just basic labor, like, oh, I can model a character. It's like, well, be careful. They can hire someone for a quarter of the price in another country. So that's different. That's different. So the conceptual artist, the people who have ideas, that is going to give you more longevity than just being able to, like back in cell painting, that disappeared. Animation's almost gone. It's all done overseas now. But the concept design, the storyboard, the writing is still done at the source. When I taught in other countries, I taught in Singapore and Taiwan and China, and I would tell them, I was like, you don't want to work on our films. You want to work on your own films. Start coming up with your own stories. You want to hire, so I said, you guys have wonderful stories. Don't tell American stories, And they're like, well, there's no industry here. Build it yourself. Start writing your own stories, hire your own people, and make it and let it grow, So, and they're starting to do that. Obviously, China, they're starting to build their own industry there. So, I say that for all of us now is, which another thing that's different too is we all have our own production studio in our laptop. We can do Final Cut, we can do green screen, we can do animation in our we can do stop motion. So there's no need to have a big studio anymore. If you do a really cool TV commercial on your laptop with the cost you $2 to make, but it just happens to be for Apple, and they pay you $1 million, that's awesome, obviously, right? We don't need a studio, So that's I think one of the biggest. This from my personal observation. I've been kind of living in a cave, so I don't really get out much. I kind of do my own thing, and I look at my own artists. I don't really care about movies that make $1 million, $100 million, or I'm just kind of focused on the movies that I like and stuff like that. So I follow the artists that I like and stuff like that. But I hear things, I'm thrilled. I get more excited every day. I'm thrilled to work. I'm thrilled to see the next movies. Just to pitch California for a little bit, I had a chance to meet Terry Gilliam, Danny Boyle, who directed Slumdog Millionaire, and also who was the third person? But I met like 3 incredible directors just like in the past 2 weeks. God, I can't remember the third director. But anyway, but there's so much. But there is stuff going on, obviously, in the East Coast too. You have to just kind of, keep your eyes open, take advantage. Like I'm sure you guys probably have an easier time shooting your own movies than you do in California. There's always cops coming around. Do you have a permit and stuff like that? When you're working in an area where they're not really used to a lot of movies being made, you can take advantage of the landscape that you have and do a really beautiful film. Or you can shoot it and use that reference and translate it to an animation. Or you can take that information and translate it into a graphic novel or something like that. So I try to really take advantage of whatever area, I'm in. I really, totally appreciate that. So anyway, it goes off the question a little bit, but anyway, you get the idea.
You mentioned like just current movies and stuff. Do you like play any games, or are there any current films that you're really into right now? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I think the film that I love, probably my favorite film, is Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, so good.
I think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, man. It's sold 11 times in the theater. And I'm actually going to have a Mad Max party at Cal Arts. And we're going to dress up in costume and stuff. But when you look at the design, right? I mean, you're shaking your head, right? The design is so good. It's way better than it needed to be. The story, the acting, everything. You see the passion in every single frame of film. It wasn't just to make money, right? It was better than the first 3 Mad Max films. So that gives me hope. It really does. Like, we look at all these old films, and it's never going to be as good as that. Fury Road is just as good as any any film that was done 40, 50 years ago, you know, and it's, the passion is out there. I heard that the director was kind of losing his passion a little bit, you know, working on, you know, whatever, Happy Feet and stuff like that. And he regained his passion and put it on the screen 110%. So as for games, I don't play games. I like looking at them. It's funny, I was working at Blizzard, right? And then when they asked me to teach ZBrush and sculpture there, and they said, "Oh, we're Blizzard," and I was like, "Oh, that's great. What do you guys do?" Like, you don't know? they were all offended. I don't know. I know the name Blizzard. And then they sent me some of their cinematics, and I was like, "Holy crap, you guys are amazing!" You know. And I'm looking forward to the Blizzard movie they're making. But it's too much for me. I'm old school. I'm like Pac-Man. You know, I can't get into thinking about going through. It's just too much thinking, and I have a limited amount of time per day, so I watch like maybe an hour of TV per week. Minimal sleep, you know, minimal partying, you know, no partying really. So I devote a lot of my time to doing my artwork. You know, sounds pretty boring. I just do my sculptures and I draw, but I like it. I really enjoy it, so it's fun.
Cool. Do we have any more last questions before we wrap this up? Got one more.
Sure.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, my name's Jack Chandler. I have a question about through just artist talks and stuff for the past month. Kind of been saying to make your own voice inside of your portfolio, kind of draw in your style or manipulate something that you think is really cool to the point where it kind of looks like yours. But you touched on earlier how if you're applying for like a movie or something like that, want to be a concept designer for a movie that might be coming up, to appeal to that in your portfolio. So I'm kind of confused as to like, are there like advantages to either or?
Yes, it's a chess game. You're playing chess, right? So you make a little chess move. Like, okay, if I'm working on Avatar, that'll give me credit so that I can turn around and do my own film. So I have to adapt my style to kind of move around. So the reason I adapted my style to get into Disney was to get into film school. You know what I'm saying? So you have to adapt and twist and turn in order to get from one place to another. If that makes more sense now. So sometimes you will have to become a chameleon in order to, you know, you can't just do your own thing. I mean, you can, but you have to make a living, and you have to get from point A to point B. You know, so that's very important. Another thing too, which I don't know if you guys got, you probably won't get from my talk so far, is that I try to run as far away from my style as possible. I look at what I'm doing and I run as far away. And if you can do that, what you're going to do is run and find yourself, right? So I'm running away from myself. I'm running to try to look at Claire Wendeling this week. I'm running to try to look at these artists that I admire. And it brings more of yourself out of you. So whenever I look down, I start seeing a style showing up. I try to surprise my friends. Oh, let me see if I can do something completely different. Because we all like different things, right? And that's when your stuff starts to really feel like you know, because what happens if you have a style and you repeat that style, you're basically plagiarizing yourself, number one. And number two, you're going to be really bored. What happens is most artists reach their peak at age about 30, and then they start going to slow decline. It starts getting worse and worse and worse. By the time they're 60, you're like, dude, what happened? Is that they're bored with themselves. Same with filmmakers, right? Oh, they were so good when they were younger. Now, dude, what's going on, man? Not going to mention any names. We all know their films, right? Because when they were younger, they weren't thinking about themselves. They were studying all these filmmakers that they liked. And at a certain point, they stopped studying. Steven Spielberg never stopped studying. He's always studying artists and filmmakers that he admires. And his films keep changing. He's still in the game, man. He's still in the game. So that's a really good question about retaining your individual voice, but knowing that you need to do certain things to get your voice heard. You know, no one could hear my voice until after I got into Disney and left Disney, and I was applying, and they looked at my work and, whoa, this is great. Where before I was showing the exact same work, but I didn't have the Disney name on my resume, and they looked at it like it was crap. You know, so you accumulate those credits when you need them. Sometimes you might not need any of that. You might just totally do your own thing and get some kind of internet following and never have to follow. You know, that's what Robert Rodriguez did. He never had to follow anybody. George Lucas never followed anybody. He did THX 1138, weird film, made no money, but he was able to scrape together a little bit of money to do American Graffiti and then Star Wars and so on. He never compromised, never. I compromised a little bit here and there, but I think it was great to push and get my my name out there. You know. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that was good insight.
Yeah, there's there's not as much of a conflict as before. So great.
I think we might have time for one more if anyone has last. But if not, then I think we're going to wrap this up.
Great. I was going to make one suggestion. If you guys have like a communal blog, you should start, maybe you already do, but start putting all your artwork on there. You do? Thumbs up?
Yeah.
That way, I would love to see what you guys do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So do that. Start putting your stuff online. Share it with us Californians. You know, who knows? We can help you out in some way.
Absolutely.
Yes, that would be awesome.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you so much, John. It was really appreciate it. But
Good work.
we got
Hey, there you go. Big Disney. Whoa.
all the love. All right. Well,
Yeah, thank everybody and keep working and keep getting your stuff out there.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.